Well, hey, what is up, guys? My name's Trevor. I'm the college associate pastor here. In case I haven't met you or you haven't seen me up here before, because obviously I'm not Travis. But I am so glad that you're here tonight because we are going into a pretty difficult, kind of heavy topic. But before we get there, I have some pretty cool news in my own life that we announced it a few weeks ago, but we found out that my wife, Tori, is pregnant with our first child. And so, so I'm going to be a dad, which I don't know if I should be more scared of the baby or if the baby should be scared that I'm going to be the one responsible for it. But I'm going to figure it out, though. And so, so we're having a kid. He or she is due on March 10th. We don't know the gender yet. We're going to actually get to find out this coming Thursday, and so I'm really looking forward to Thursday morning. Obviously, a lot of people were asking, like, oh, do you think it's a boy or a girl? And I'm like, I have no idea. My wife is, for some reason, very confident that it's a boy. I don't know if she's already got that mother's intuition or what, but I feel like it's a little early for that, so I don't know. I just know I'm excited either way, and Thursday morning can't get here soon enough because obviously when you find out the gender, you get to start doing things like kind of preparing for what the nursery is going to be like, the baby's room, and then, putting stuff on the baby shower registry and all these fun things. Like I cannot wait to be a dad. For me, that's just something that I've always wanted to be. It is a dad, and it's finally here, and so March 10th is just like, I'm like, all right, let's just hurry up and first off, let's get done with 2020, and then we can go to March and be in 2021, which will be good for everybody. Some stuff we've been doing, get ready. Like I was in the baby's room, and I was measuring a couch to see if it would fit on a wall. And I was just looking in the room, and I was thinking, man, like, in 4 months, like that crib's going to be on that wall. And there's gonna be a little baby in it, looking at me, and I'm just gonna, and I just started crying. Like I was at home by myself, and I'm just there, and I just started crying. So I guess like being a dad, like I'm already just like this big weenie now, and so it's probably especially if I have a little girl, like everything's making me emotional. If I see anything that has to do with anything about parenting or being a dad, I'm getting emotional. I'm getting emotional right now talking. And so like I was in my car and I was driving, I think, to church a couple weeks ago, listening to some country music, and the Carrie Underwood song came on, All American Girl. Anyone? And like that big note where she's like saying what the guy says, and he's like, honey, I want a girl. And I was like, like I'm sitting there like just everything's making me emotional. But in everything, I want to be a good dad, and I want to be a good parent. And I think part of that is obviously all of us, we want to protect our kids when we have them. We want to guard our kids from things that could hurt them. We want to keep them safe from harm. And now in our world today, it's not just physical stuff, and it's not just, keeping them safe while they're playing out in the front yard, and it's not just keeping them safe at school, all those things. There's a lot of stuff online that we got to protect them from. And one of those things that I want to guard my kid from in the online world is the issue that we're covering tonight, which is pornography. And I know that immediately we're kind of all like, ooh, he said porn, like, and you're kind of like already like, oh man, we have to cover that tonight? Like, hey, let's go to the restroom and leave. Like, it's one of those uncomfortable topics, but I know that I want to guard my kid from it because I know what it did to my life. And if anyone that knows me knows that that's a part of my story, that God pulled me out of that. And so just right here, I want to go ahead and acknowledge that this is a bit of an uncomfortable conversation or uncomfortable topic for many. Like it's still kind of seen as one of those things that you don't talk about. So I don't want to pretend like this isn't a kind of a tough topic to cover tonight. And just to help with that, by the way, if you're going to a community group after this, which we'd love for you to go to one, you're going to split up between guys and girls tonight just to kind of make that a little bit more comfortable, because I know that guys and girls don't really want to talk about that in front of one another. But here's the deal. When it comes to something like pornography, the only way to fight it is to address it. The only way to know how to handle it is to talk about it. And so I want to guard my kid from it in the future, but you don't guard someone by sheltering them, because we all know kids that were sheltered growing up. It's by informing them about the truth and what it is and what it does and why it's hurtful to our lives. And so I know that for many of you in the room tonight, that you came in here carrying an addiction to pornography, and you are in what I would call an abusive relationship with it. And some of you may not have even realized it coming in here tonight, but that was me at one point. coming into a church trapped, controlled and addicted to something like pornography. But God set me free. God rescued me, and I believe that he wants to do that for you tonight as well. And if that applies to you, you know who you are, and I'm glad you're here because I've been there. But if that doesn't directly apply to you, I promise you there is someone in your life right now that you love and you care about that is dealing with this. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it may be. It's such a massive issue. But first, I'm not just going to tell you guys how bad porn is and why it's wrong and then not give you guys practical steps. So we will get practical. But we do have to look at what does the Bible say about it. And one thing that I found really interesting is that porn can actually be traced back all the way to like AD 79. So that's like 79 years after Jesus died on the cross. And so that's biblical times. That's New Testament times. We know that there's a city called Pompeii. It was a big city in Rome. And they have actually found sexual paintings painted to cause arousal. They found them in some ruins from some buildings and structures in that time. And so different forms, a different form of pornography actually did exist in biblical times. And that kind of allows us to make the conclusion or the statement that I'm going to make next. But there's a Greek word, porneia. And this word porneia is the Greek word for a word that we see in the Bible a lot, sexual immorality. Sexual immorality is mentioned like 80 times in the New Testament, and it comes from that Greek word porneia. And porneia obviously is where we get our modern term pornography. And that means, porneia means prostitution, whoredom, fornication, adultery, or sexual immorality. So porneia is the distortion of anything sexual. And we see that over and over again in Scripture. We are warned of the dangers and the harm of sexual immorality, told to flee from it, to stay away from it. And so one thing is for sure, you can't say that the Bible doesn't address it. It may not address it specifically by name because that word, pornography, did not exist at that time. But it does address it when it teaches against sexual immorality. And we know that Jesus in Matthew 15:19 says that he says sexual immorality comes from the heart. And that it's a heart issue for us. And then in Acts 15 and other places in Acts, we're told to abstain from sexual immorality. And then again in 1 Corinthians 6, Paul, he's writing to the Romans, and he tells everyone to flee from sexual immorality. So we know the Bible addresses it. We know that what the Bible would say about pornography is that it is not good for us, that it is sinful for our lives and harmful to us. But when Paul says to flee, how do we flee from pornography? We flee from it by being honest about it, by talking about it. And so let's just go ahead and get this out of the way. For some people, you might wonder, like, how big of a deal porn actually is. Like, how many people even watch it, especially in the church, right? Like, not a lot of people watch porn, right? How many Christians? Like, is it really do we need to have a whole message on it? And so I want to look at just a few statistics. One of them being that 64% of Christian men admit to monthly use. So that's Christian proclaiming men that probably go to church. 64% admit to monthly use, and 15% of Christian women admit to monthly use. So it's an issue even in the church. And then out of the churches as a whole, 40 million Americans view porn monthly. 40 million people monthly. 95% of teenage boys have been introduced by the age of 17. And it's estimated that probably around 50 to 60% of females by the age of 17. And it's crazy because I meet with guys weekly to talk about this issue in their lives. And many of them share with me how that problem started for them at an age as young as like 7 or 8. And that's common. Like, I'm telling you, like, this is a weekly thing. And so you can only imagine what that does to a young child's mind at that age. And then they grow up to be 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21. And you got to think, man, how that could be affecting their view on women and on sexuality. And this is an issue for women as well. It's estimated that 79, so basically 80% of men watch porn monthly between the ages of 18 and 30. So just like overall stat, 80% of men between 18 and 30 watch porn monthly, 20 to 30% of women. And so we know that porn, it's consumed our culture. In the Christian community and obviously outside of it, it's robbing people, stealing from people what God created sex and intimacy to be. but it's been completely normalized. But just because something's normal does not mean that it's moral or good. Another crazy stat that I saw is that in a survey with the American Academy of Lawyers, they found that porn at least partially contributed to 60% of divorces. So 60% of the divorces that you hear about, porn is a contributing factor in that marriage ending. Imagine losing your family, losing your husband or wife from a relationship standpoint, losing your ability to be with your kids every day because of fake, meaningless, empty digital pleasure. Imagine losing your family over that, but it happens all the time. And it happens because we've been lied to that it's normal, that it's acceptable, that it's harmless, that it's just you, that it doesn't affect anybody else. But that's not true. And the reality is that if you desire a good marriage, if you desire to view men and women not as objects but as human beings, that pornography is harmful to you. Pornography is going to keep you from being able to have those things. And so it's a massive issue, and we have to talk about it. But if you want to defeat something in your life, you got to study it, you got to know about it, and then you got to systematically take it down. So if it's plaguing your life right now, the only way that you're going to overcome it is by knowing about it and knowing how it works. And just a current reference for you, I don't know what's happening in the game right now, but like the NBA Finals is going on, and you have the Lakers and the Heat. And so far, the Lakers have been like dominating the Heat. They studied how they operate. They knew the plays that they make. They studied their system of how they play basketball, and they're beating them. And that's what we want to do with pornography tonight. We want to look at what it is, how it affects us, and then we can determine some practical steps to take to get free from it. And so I want to just hit on three big things that porn affects. Three big things that porn affects in our lives. The first one is that porn affects the brain. Porn affects the brain. In a study at Columbia University, they have found that porn actually has a more powerful and lasting impact on the brain than even real sex. So porn actually affects the brain more than real sex does. Looking at a screen affects the brain more than being with an actual person. And then porn can actually eventually cause the brain to not desire or crave real sex at all, but only an encounter with images and videos on a screen. And so what they found is that porn eventually replaces real sex for a lot of people, for people that are addicted to it. And they've also found that there's this thing scientists call the flow state. And it's, when talking about the brain, it's what many people feel or experience when they say something like an athlete, maybe they're playing basketball, and it just seems like every shot is landing. They're like, man, I'm in the zone. And it's like everything is going perfect. Or like you open up a book and you're reading a book, and maybe you're a reader in here and you can relate to this, but you're like reading, and like 3 hours later, you're like, oh, wow, the time has just flown by. And you were in the flow state, is what scientists call that. And so basically what's happening is your brain is basically like on steroids for a little bit. And so your brain is super heightened and super aware. It has amazing memory. And so let's take something like porn, for example. Usually when you're watching porn, you're alone, completely zoned out, and hyper-focused and intensely staring at the screen. You go into what's called a flow state, and this amplifies and increases the brain's ability to remember and get hooked to what you are watching. And so what's unfortunate about that is that when you're in the flow state, because your memories are heightened, usually those memories are going to stick with you for a long, long, long time. Like I can watch the TV show The Office, right? And I can watch season 1, episode 1, and well, maybe I wouldn't forget that episode, but just because it's season 1. But season 2, episode 1. And if I don't watch The Office for 5 years, like I'm not going to remember that episode. I'm going to forget about it. I'm not probably in the flow state while I'm watching The Office. But when someone watches porn, one image can stick with them for decades because you're in the flow state when you're watching it. Another way that porn affects the brain is that over time, as it continues to encounter arousal by porn, it actually begins to rewire itself to make you crave porn. Actually, there's been many studies done on this. You can go to a website called fightthenewdrug.org and find more about this. But they say that porn affects the same way, it's the same addictiveness as a drug. And so an addiction to pornography in the brain is no different than an addiction to something like cocaine or heroin or another hard drug. Studies have found that porn creates these massive dopamine dumps, just like drugs do. And the more you're exposed to those dopamine dumps caused by porn, it's never enough, and you always crave more. And so that's why porn addiction is so difficult to overcome, because your brain is literally creating new pathways for porn addiction as if it's a drug. And that's why porn has been linked heavily to depression, to anxiety, to increased stress, to social problems, because porn literally changes everything about your brain when you begin to get addicted to it. It quite literally, it makes your brain unhealthy. And that's what it's doing to your brain. It's creating new pathways. It's called like neuroplasticity or some science term like that. And it's creating these new pathways, and like your brain is actually changing based on what you're looking at, and that's how an addiction forms. But I know if you're listening to this, you're kind of like, and maybe this is you in the room tonight, you're addicted to this, which stats would show that many people in here are. If this is causing you to freak out a little bit, just know that the same way that the brain can create new pathways, those pathways can go away, and they can be replaced with something else. When you don't reinforce pathways in your brain, they eventually disappear, and they can be replaced with something new. So just like your brain can rewire itself to be addicted to porn, you can reverse that, essentially. But it is very difficult, and it is a struggle, and that's why you cannot fight something like this alone. The next thing that porn affects your brain, but porn also affects your heart. Porn is not just a brain issue. In light of all of that, it's a heart issue, like Jesus says in Matthew. Watching porn it's like being addicted to, watching porn and being addicted to it is like giving your heart to something without a pulse, essentially. You're giving yourself over to something that puts you in your most vulnerable state, but yet it doesn't care how vulnerable you are. It doesn't have the ability to care about you. It doesn't see you. It only takes from you. It harms you. You're dependent on it, but it doesn't need you. It doesn't value you. It doesn't have the ability to value you. Its main goal is to lure you in and just take, and leave you empty so it can profit off ad revenue and subscriptions. Like, that's not good for your heart. But that's what you're doing when you watch porn, is you're giving yourself over to something that is not real, that doesn't have the ability to fulfill the desires that you really have for intimacy and affection and value and love. Within this idea that porn affects your heart, I want to make this statement that pornography, what it does is it gradually lets you kill you. Porn lets you kill you. And in 1 Corinthians 6:18, Paul's writing to the church in Rome, in Corinth, and this was in this culture that he's writing to. All kinds of sexual immorality were massive issues. And so in verse 18 he says, "Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits outside of the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body." So what Paul is saying here is that sexual sin, it's hurting you. It's sinning against yourself. Like it's hurting your own heart. It's harming you, killing you emotionally and spiritually. All porn is it's temporary fulfillment that can lead to a life in chains for many years, like it did for me. It's an addiction that slowly consumes you and numbs you week by week, day by day, night by night, and it eats away at your soul and your heart from the inside out. And I will tell you, when speaking about the heart and speaking spiritually, when I was in my deepest addiction to porn, that's when I was the furthest from God that I've ever felt. It put me in a place spiritually that I've never been otherwise, because it was hurting my heart. It was killing me from the inside. 1 Corinthians 6:15 and 16, so a couple verses before, Paul says, "Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For as it is written, the two will become one flesh." And the way that this relates to pornography here is that porn addicts, when you're watching porn over and over again, you are basically becoming one with the screen, members of the screen, and it gradually eats away at your heart towards people, your heart towards God, your heart towards yourself, a lot of self-guilt that I felt when I was in that. Porn is basically modern prostitution. It's sex being sold. There's no other way to put it. It is literally modern prostitution. Every single video that you watch is tied to money. That's the only reason why it exists. The porn industry generates $13 billion a year. Porn is modern prostitution. That's exactly what it is. So you are giving yourselves over to a screen, and that's what I did for a long time. Some factual ways that porn affects your heart and the way that you view others is that there was a study, a survey in 2012. They surveyed 1,500 porn-addicted males, and 56% admitted that their taste in porn as they watched more became increasingly extreme, hardcore, aggressive, and controlling. So at least 50% of porn addicts admit that it is slowly morphing their view of sexuality. And what this causes is for those same people, they eventually are going to begin to view intimacy in the same way with a real woman or real man. And so you got to ask yourself, do I want porn affecting and determining how I view my future spouse? Do I want porn affecting and determining what I expect from my future wife or husband? Because nowadays it's like so many males and even some women, they get addicted to porn so early on, long before they have any sort of real relationships with the opposite sex, that porn is actually what taught them about sexuality. And porn is usually filled with acting and cheating and adultery and aggression, unrealistic time frames and experiences, unrealistic bodies. Nobody looks like that. Abuse and many other things. So by the time a person is ready for a real relationship with a person, and then maybe even get married, their idea of intimacy and what real sex is has been shaped by pornography. And this causes them to never be satisfied with real intimacy. They don't desire their partner because their partner doesn't give them what the screen did. And studies show that this, in a lot of marriages, it eventually leads to less sex, less connection with the real person, and eventually to no intimacy at all. And so you don't want to carry this stuff into your marriage. You don't want to carry it into a dating relationship either, which we'll talk more about in a minute. But this is what porn does to your heart. This is what porn can do to someone that you love if you don't address it now. And so you got to ask yourself, do I want my heart towards my future spouse to be shaped and twisted by pornography? Do I want my future wife or husband to feel like they're not enough, that they're unworthy because of my porn problem that I didn't address? And I believe that the answer for everyone to that question is no. Nobody wants that. So I'm asking you, don't let porn continue to change your heart and your ability to love well. And I'm asking you to do something about that tonight. Would you get honest with yourself and with God? The third thing that porn affects, of course, the brain, the heart, and the third thing is that the porn affects the world and people around you. Focusing on the world for a second, if we consider that the private act of viewing porn can do things like rewire your brain, devastate real relationships, affect how you see the opposite sex, it can destroy a family, literally. What happens when you multiply that act by millions and millions and millions and millions of people? There's probably, they estimate about 100 million people worldwide are addicted to pornography. So when you multiply those effects by millions, what's the impact going to be on our culture, on our humanity, on our world? In 2015, this is truly a crazy stat. In 2015, from a single website, they recorded 4.3 billion hours of porn consumed from one website in 1 year. That's 500,000 years of porn watched in 1 year from only one website. And there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of those websites out there. So our world is consuming billions of hours of porn, likely in the tens of billions when you factor in it all in a year. That has to be affecting our culture in negative ways. We see it playing out in TV now. I mean, even just like mainstream TV shows have softcore porn in it, if you call it for what it is. It like shows everything, but at the same time it shows everything, you know? Like it uses like the shade, like the shadows and the blankets, and it's like, that's porn. That's what it is. But we're so numb to it, it's so normal to us that we don't even see it. But then getting really kind of serious, like what are the consequences of that when it's been shown that porn addiction, one, it increases marital infidelity by over 300%. And then also, it's been shown that 88% of porn available depicts aggression and violence. How is that affecting our world now? And another thing is, we know for a fact that major porn sites, the ones that everyone's probably heard of, they have been directly linked to, one, abuse on sets, but also child pornography and the human trafficking industry. If you can name a porn site, you can name a site that is linked to child pornography and human trafficking, 100%. And it's really easy to look up the stats on that. And so you got to go like, man, if these major porn sites are directly connected to human trafficking and child pornography, how in the world can I know what I'm looking at? It's safe to say that porn is having very negative effects on humanity. That's just the reality of it. According to humantraffickingresearch.org, 80% of survivors, so people rescued from human trafficking, report that they were trained with pornography on what trafficking customers would want so they could be better for their customers. Many survivors say that they were forced into filming and that their videos are still on popular porn sites today for the world to see. So right now, there is human trafficking porn that is available on big websites for anyone to see. There's an org called Exodus Cry that you can look up. There's an Instagram page for Exodus Cry, and they are fighting against one of the biggest porn sites in the world, if not the biggest. And they share stories about people coming out of that, talking about how they would reach out to these porn sites to take down the video, and they would say, no, you don't own the rights to that. Human trafficking for everyone to see. And so, again, that's just the reality that we have to face, is that these major sites, there's zero filtering or monitoring. And the reality is that you have no way of knowing the background of the video that you're looking at and how it was made and who it was made and the circumstances behind that. The reality is that viewing porn indirectly or directly, depending on how you view it, supports human trafficking and child pornography through ad revenue, through viewer demand. That's just a reality, is that porn is harming humanity. It's not just you. It's not just hurting you, although it is, it's hurting the world around you. So porn affects the world in a very dark ways, but also watching porn, as we've talked about, it doesn't just affect you, it affects people in your life that you care about. Your future wife or husband, I cannot tell you how many times I've met with guys, especially, and they say, like when I get married, man, like I'm not going to watch that anymore. Like as soon as I get married, man, that's it. And it's kind of like, it's a dangerous game to play because you are gambling on the health of your future marriage. You're gambling on your marriage. Because my first question is always, why? Why do you think that you're going to be able to do that? Why do you think that you're going to be able to cut off an addiction just because you get married? Because I hate to break it to you, but when you get married, you don't have sex every day, okay? That's just a reality. And so you might, a couple times a week would be good for a healthy marriage. That's just the reality to you. I hate to break it to you, but that's the truth. And so if you're watching porn every day or 4 or 5 times a week, that's not going to match up to how much sex you have when you're married. And then what are you going to do like when your wife, maybe you're married and your wife gets pregnant and she actually can't have sex as much. And then actually when she has the baby, you got to go 6 to 8 weeks without it. Are you going to then fall back on an addiction that you never manned up and handled in the first place before you got married? I'm just asking, is that the gamble that you want to make on your marriage, on your future wife or your future husband? Is that what you want to do? And I think for everyone in the room, I could speak for you. The answer is no. Because I've been there and I had to decide, do I want to make that gamble or not? We have a former leader here at the Way whose parents got divorced because his dad couldn't stop watching porn. This stuff happens. 60% of marriages end because of that contribution of pornography. Of course, also, not just your husband or wife, but it could also affect your current boyfriend or girlfriend. And I just want to say this. I know it's going to step on some toes, but if you're dating someone and they're addicted to porn, and they are not willing to address it or handle it, break up with them. If you are dating a guy and he's hooked on porn, and after tonight, per se, he's not willing to do anything about it, there's no sign that he wants to address it and handle it, break up with him. He doesn't deserve you. He's not in a place to be dating you. He's definitely not in a place to lead you to marriage. But here's the thing, is that I do believe that you necessarily don't have to break up. I know couples that, the guy was trapped in that addiction and they addressed it and handled it, and now they're married and they have a great marriage. But you've got to own up to it tonight. And I believe that you can get free and you can find healing in Christ without necessarily having to break up. But if the guy or the girl is unwilling, it's time to break up. If they're not willing to do anything about it, they're cheating on you every day or every week, and they're basically telling you, I don't value you and I don't value our future marriage. That's not someone that you want to keep giving more time to. And if you're that guy or that girl, I want you to know that I love you and I want to help you. I'm up here talking about this because this was my life for many years. I want to point you to freedom in Christ. I want you to be free. And I'm just asking that you would be willing to get real about it, to address it tonight, to bring it to God tonight. And maybe you're single and you're wondering, should I date if I'm addicted to porn? I would say no. Do not start dating while you're addicted to pornography. No, if that guy or that girl that you really like, if that's an issue for them, do not start dating them. I don't care how handsome or pretty they are. It doesn't matter. The next point tonight, as we move on from those three big truths, a point that I have to make because I want you to know is that complete freedom is possible. Complete freedom from this is possible. In John 8:31-36, it says, so Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are offspring of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free? And Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son remains forever. So if the son sets you free, you will be free indeed. And man, that is good news for us to read that, to hear that. When Jesus says that you will be set free, he's not talking about partial freedom. He's not saying that you're going to be a slave off and on. He's saying if you know me, you know truth. And that truth is freedom. Jesus breaks chains. Jesus sets people free. That's what he does. But maybe like some of you, I know at a point I did not believe that complete freedom was possible. I believed a lie that it was not possible, that I was going to have to just deal with this forever, that the struggle would always be there. But I'm telling you, that's a common misconception that there's really no other way to get completely free, because that's not true. I mean, if that's not true, then I don't know what I am, because I'm walking in freedom for almost 8 years, and I have a great marriage, and my wife is fully aware of the struggle that I used to have. I'm telling you, complete freedom is possible. But I've met with so many guys who don't believe that, and I just want to tell you, if that's you, if you came in here tonight trapped in this weighing you down, a guy or a girl, I'm telling you, like, you can be set free. You can take steps towards freedom tonight. And that's really how I want to begin to close. Is I want to go through exactly how I got free. What did I do? The steps that I took that ultimately changed my life in ways that I will never regret. Because this thing that's been robbing you of your freedom, that's been stealing from your life and your future, man, there's a way to get free from it tonight. And so the last thing we're going to talk about is practical steps to get free are available. They are available. And the first step that we see here is that you've got to accept the truth about what porn is and what it's doing to your life. You've got to view porn for what it really is and realizing the way that it's been hurting you, the way that it's been harming your life. Everything that we've talked about the last 30 minutes or so, don't ignore what we've talked about tonight. Just realize it for what it is. And it's something that is hurting your life, and it's only going to stack up. It's only going to continue to hurt you. It's only going to continue to creep towards your future marriage if you don't handle it. So step one, just accept it for what it is and say, yeah, man, I see that. And then the second step is this: you gotta bring it into the light. And what I mean by that is you've got to confess this to God, to yourself, and you've got to bring it to a peer that you trust to fight this with you. You've got to confess it. I know that's probably the most uncomfortable step, is to go to someone and say, hey, man, like, I've been dealing with this. Hey, this has been a thing for me. Okay, God, I guess I'm going to go talk to somebody about this. But although that might be the most uncomfortable step, it is literally, it's the beginning of life change for you if you will confess that tonight. And then step 3, and this is a big one. This is one that cannot be understated or overlooked. You've got to address the places where you have access to it, and then you got to cut it off. You can't just leave things the way that they are. It'd be like, we talked about alcohol last week, and it would be like an alcoholic who's like, yeah, I want to stop drinking. And then like you go in their house and like in their cabinet, they have like their 5 favorite whiskeys on the shelf. And it's kind of like, I know you're trying to stop drinking, so maybe let's get rid of the stuff that you've been drinking, huh? Like it might be a good idea. And that's how we got to look at pornography. Let's address the areas and the places where you've been accessing. And I know for some of you, for many of you in the room, this phone that you have in your pocket or in your purse, it might as well be the devil for you. This right here is robbing you of all things good. Because every day or every week, you can't stop looking at the stuff on there. And I'm telling you, on the iPhone, there's actually a really easy way to go in there and you can limit adult content, and we could do that tonight. And then you can go on your computer, and there's a thing called Covenant Eyes that you can download on your computer, and you can actually download it on an Android phone as well. Just getting really practical here. I've been free for almost 8 years, and I still have Covenant Eyes on my laptop. Why? Because it's just not worth it to not have it on there. Why would I want to allow myself an avenue to stumble if I knew that I could do something about it? And so address the places that you have access to it, and let's cut it off tonight. There's ways to do that. And then step 4, I kind of mentioned it a little bit, but you've got to set up an accountability system. Have a friend. So what Covenant Eyes is, you download it, and it actually sends weekly emails, reports to an accountability partner that you trust so they can check in on you. They can see how you're doing. And again, it's something that I still practice to this day. And I get emails from probably 10 or 15 different guys every week, reports, so that I can see how they're doing, so that I can check in on them. Because we all need accountability. What I will tell you is that if you came in here tonight dealing with this alone, do not walk out of here dealing with this alone. We're not made to deal with these kinds of things by ourselves. And that goes with any kind of sin struggle. Whether it's porn or not, you're not made to deal with these things alone. So set up an accountability system tonight. And if you don't really know someone in your life that could be, if you're a guy, like I'll be that guy for you, or I will get you connected with somebody else. And if you're a girl, I will get you connected with one of the women on our staff. And then a step further, we have 60 people on our leadership team here at The Way, and I promise you, I will get you paired with somebody tonight if this is a step that you want to take. There's a community groups meeting right now, and people are getting set free because they're going and they're confessing and they're getting accountability, and that's what you can do tonight if this is something that you're dealing with, or anything else for that matter. And the final thing, the 5th step that I did in my journey as I was trying to get free, is I realized that I told you guys earlier how when I was in my deepest addiction to pornography, it was the furthest that I'd ever felt from God. And so I had to change that. And so within all of these steps that I was taking, I had to start seeking Christ. And that's the 5th step. Be seeking Christ within all of these things. Because I'm telling you, like this, none of this matters up here if you're not seeking Jesus. None of this has any purpose or meaning behind it if you're not seeking Jesus. None of this is going to last if you're not seeking Jesus. Because here's the thing, when you're alone and you're battling that temptation, and when you're alone and you're beating yourself up because of all the wounds and the scars that this thing has created in you, Jesus is the one that can heal that for you. Jesus is the one that steps in, and he will set you free from the shame, the guilt, the pain, the hurt. One of the craziest things for me is I was always told, like, oh man, that stuff's going to be in your head forever. And I said, no, you don't know my Jesus. And as I began to take those steps to get free, I was going to God and I was spending time with God. And one of the things I prayed over and over again for years was, God, would you get that crap out of my mind? It's what science says you can't do. But I'm telling you, like, here I am 8 years later, and that stuff is out of my mind. Jesus healed what I thought could not be healed. And I'm telling you tonight, if you will come and you will bring that to the feet of Jesus, he will heal it. He will walk with you. You will experience freedom. He says, when you know me, you know freedom. And so I don't know what it is for you tonight. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's something else that you need to bring to God tonight. Maybe it's something else that you need to confess to appear tonight. But if you want freedom, it is found in Jesus. And that's why he died on the cross for me, for you, is because he wanted to give you freedom from what you could not free yourself from. And so I'm telling you, if this is your struggle tonight, that complete freedom is possible. But you got to take a step in faith and do it. And if it's something else, take a step in faith tonight. Jesus will meet you right where you're at.